police officers search Black woman without reason, but panic when they discover she is the wife of the new commander. In a city marked by racial tensions and inequalities, a simple police encounter turns into a verdict on the justice and integrity of a system that is supposed to ensure the safety of all. Angela Carter, a respected attorney and wife of the new police chief, finds herself at the center of a scandal that could change not only her life, but also the dynamics of an entire community. Angela grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, where she learned early on that life could be challenging. At 35, she became a renowned lawyer, recognized for her determination and skill in fighting for others' rights. Recently married to James Wilson, the new police chief, she believed that her position and influence would protect her from injustices. However, one day while attending a community event in a park, her reality changes drastically. In a humiliating and unjustified police encounter, Angela is searched in front of friends and strangers, with the officers unaware of who she really is. The pain and indignation of public humiliation reignite in Angela the memories of discrimination that have always followed her. She finds herself in a dilemma: fight for justice or remain silent and preserve the image she has built over the years. Feeling vulnerable yet determined, she decides not to remain silent. The decision to expose the incident to the media generates a backlash that resonates throughout the city, transforming her case into a symbol of resistance against police brutality. Meanwhile, James, the husband who should be supporting her, is engulfed by an internal conflict. He finds himself torn between his loyalty to the department and his love for Angela. As the pressure mounts, he realizes that his convictions are being tested in ways he never imagined. The situation demands that he reevaluate his priorities and the true nature of his position as police chief. Tension escalates when Angela, fueled by a desire for justice, begins investigating other cases of police abuse, determined to gather evidence and mobilize the community. What started as a disrespect to her personal dignity transforms into a fight for change in a failing system. Through this, Angela becomes a powerful voice against oppression, challenging those who have the power to make a difference. Angela's story reveals not only the struggle of one woman, but also the internal battle of a man who must decide between what is right and what is easy. In a hostile and challenging environment, they must confront their own prejudices, traumas, and the need for a fresh start. As the two protagonists navigate this sea of uncertainties, the unraveling of their lives offers an opportunity for growth and reflection, showing that true courage lies in facing injustices and seeking the truth, even if it comes at a high price. Angela felt the weight of humiliation still echoing in her mind. After the incident in the park, she found herself surrounded by a cloud of conflicting emotions. Indignation pulsed within her, but there was also a latent fear, a voice whispering that perhaps it would be safer to remain silent. However, her determination propelled her to act. By deciding to take her story to the media, Angela sought not only justice for herself, but also aimed to give a voice to those who had been silenced for too long. Meanwhile, James Wilson, her husband and police chief, struggled with his own internal storms. He knew that what had happened was wrong, but his position placed him in a delicate spot. The pressure from the department and the need to maintain order made him hesitate. He watched as Angela transformed into a symbol of resistance, and it left him divided. The love he felt for her encouraged him to support her, but loyalty to his role kept him trapped in an ethical dilemma. The situation became even more complicated when Angela began receiving support from unexpected allies. Among them was Marcus, a young community activist who had grown up in one of the neighborhoods most affected by police brutality. He had contagious energy, and his passion for justice was palpable. Marcus offered to help Angela gather information about other cases of police abuse. Thus, an unusual friendship began to blossom between them, based on a common goal, but also laden with challenges, as James did not look favorably upon this new partnership. As Angela delved deeper into her investigation, she encountered accounts from other victims who, like her, had suffered abuses and humiliations. Each story she heard strengthened her, but also left her distressed. The pain and sorrow she felt for those people made her question her own strength. She wondered if she could truly make a difference. What if she failed? The weight of responsibility felt almost unbearable. James, for his part, faced increasing pressure within the police force. His superiors demanded that he control the situation and silence the dissenting voices, especially those fueled by Angela and Marcus. He found himself in tense meetings where his loyalty and integrity were tested. With each meeting, the line between what was right and what was expected became more blurred. The trust he once had in his position began to crumble, and he questioned whether he was truly making a difference or merely perpetuating an oppressive system. As the days passed, Angela began receiving anonymous threats, messages that intimidated her, making her feel watched. The first time an envelope arrived at her home, her fingers trembled as she opened it. It was a simple note telling her to stop her investigations, but instead of frightening her, it made her feel more determined. She could not remain silent. Not now. Meanwhile, the tension began to affect her relationship with James. He felt powerless, caught between the love he had for his wife and the need to protect his career. Conversations between them became more difficult, laden with silences and looks of disdain. Angela couldn't understand why James didn't openly support her, and James felt increasingly isolated in his position, unable to express his concerns without creating more conflict. The difficulties multiplied. Angela began to feel pressure not only from the police, but also from the community itself. While some saw her as a heroine, others considered her a traitor, putting the safety of the city at risk. This battle between being seen as a fighter for justice or a troublemaker began to weigh heavily on her shoulders. With each new criticism, her confidence wavered a little more. On the other hand, her friendship with Marcus became an anchor amidst the storm. He encouraged her to keep going, to not give up, but at the same time, his presence brought a new set of challenges. James watched her get closer and closer to Marcus, and it made him uneasy. He didn't want Angela to feel alone in her struggle, but the truth was that with each new step she took, the distance between them seemed to grow. Angela's battle was not just against police brutality, it was also an internal struggle, a conflict that forced her to confront her fears and insecurities. She needed to decide if she could continue fighting and if she still believed in change. And more importantly, she needed to discover what it truly meant to be strong in a world that often seemed so unfair. Angela felt as if she were on an emotional roller coaster, and each turn felt sharper than the last. The deeper she delved into her fight for justice, the more evident the barriers she had to face became. The accounts of other victims left her distressed, but at the same time, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. However, that same determination began to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Anonymous threats continued to arrive. One day, a particularly intimidating envelope left her paralyzed. Inside was a photo of her, taken at a moment when she was leaving her home with the message, "We are watching you." The feeling of being watched enveloped her like a heavy cloak, and her nights became longer, filled with insomnia. With each message, fear sprouted, but so did her resilience. She knew she couldn't let fear dominate her. Meanwhile, James felt increasingly anguished. He tried to support Angela in silence, but the pressure from the department was mounting. It was a risky game for him, and the tension between them became palpable. He wanted to shout to the world that he was on her side, but the reality of his position kept him gagged. Every time he saw Angela meet with Marcus, a twinge of jealousy and insecurity arose in his heart. He feared that their closeness might create an even wider chasm between him and his wife. Marcus, on the other hand, was becoming an increasingly central figure in Angela's life. He was always present, helping her compile data, connect with other victims, and plan protests. His energy inspired her, but it also provoked an internal conflict. Angela wondered if her friendship with Marcus was creating a new kind of dependency. There were moments when she felt very close to him, and it made her uneasy. What did she really want? The support of a friend or reconciliation with her husband? The atmosphere in the community was changing. The protests that Angela and Marcus organized were attracting more and more people, but they were also escalating tensions with the police. One night, during a protest, the situation turned violent. Angela found herself in the midst of the chaos, surrounded by shouts and pushes. Fear washed over her again, and she felt as if she were losing control. When the police began making mass arrests, her heart raced. Was she putting everyone in danger? That doubt consumed her. That night, when she returned home, Angela was exhausted. What should have been a moment of triumph turned into a feeling of despair. She and James exchanged few words, and the tension was palpable. Looking at him, Angela saw the pain on his face. There was a chasm between them, and every time they tried to connect, they felt as though they were drifting further apart. James wanted to protect her, but his actions seemed to be causing more harm than healing. Before we continue with this gripping story, Take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know in the comments which city you are watching this video from. At work, James faced criticism from his colleagues. Some accused him of protecting Angela instead of maintaining order. He felt like an intruder, a traitor in his own team. The pressure mounted, and he realized he needed to make a decision. He could continue to ignore what was happening, or join Angela and Marcus in the fight for justice. With each passing day, that choice became more urgent. At the same time, the emotional pressure was beginning to manifest physically in Angela. She felt tired and stressed, with constant headaches and difficulty sleeping. The battle she fought within herself began to reflect in her body, and it worried her. Was she harming herself? The idea of failing was not just a matter of not achieving her goals. It was also a matter of health and well-being. Marcus tried to help, always attempting to lighten the load that Angela carried, but at times, he also challenged her. In a heated discussion, he confronted her about her hesitation to speak publicly about her experiences. "Angela, you need to be the voice that so many people can't be. We can't let fear stop us from fighting," he said, his passion evident in every word. That conversation left Angela conflicted. She wanted to be strong, but the idea of exposing herself once again scared her. Angela's struggle was complex, filled with moments of doubt and despair, but also with courage and hope. She realized that the journey for justice was not just about others, but also about herself. Every challenge she faced, every tear she shed, brought her a little closer to who she really was and what she truly believed in. And although the road ahead was full of obstacles, she knew she could not give up. The fight for justice was a fight worth having, even if it meant confronting her own limitations and fears. Angela was at a critical point in her journey. The threats she had received kept her on high alert, and the protest she organized with Marcus kept her in a constant internal battle. She felt torn, caught between the determination to fight for justice and the fear that consumed her. One night, while reviewing documents for a new meeting, she received an anonymous text message that made her stop. The message read, "You shouldn't have messed with us. The consequences will be severe." Angela's heart raced. The feeling of being watched, which was already oppressive, now felt unbearable. She looked around as if she could see someone hiding in the darkness. The fear she had tried to control was now a storm within her. However, instead of letting it defeat her, she decided that she needed to act. The next morning, she decided it was time to gather all the victims she knew and create a safe space for them to share their stories. This could be the answer she had been searching for. Meanwhile, James was fighting his own battle. He felt like he was in a dead end. The criticism was mounting, and the pressure from his team to distance himself from Angela left him distressed. He wanted to support his wife, but the fear of losing his job and reputation in the corporation paralyzed him. With each passing day, he felt more distant from her. He knew he needed to make a decision, but the uncertainty consumed him. One morning, Angela and Marcus met at a cafe to discuss the next steps for the meeting. They were excited, talking about how they could inspire others to stand up and tell their stories. During the conversation, Marcus mentioned new evidence he had discovered, something that could expose the truth behind the corporation's actions. Angela felt a wave of hope and determination. "We need to take this forward," she said, her energy renewed. However, as they were discussing, a group of men entered the cafe. Angela recognized one of them. He was one of the executives from the company being investigated. Her heart sank. The man looked directly at her, and a cold smile appeared on his face. The sense of threat was palpable. She didn't know if it was just her perceptions distorted by fear, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Angela felt that with every step she took, she was getting closer to something dangerous. That night after the meeting, Angela received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was low and menacing. "Stop this, or you will regret it." Fear enveloped her again, but now there was something more, a newfound determination. She knew she couldn't stop. The fight for justice was no longer just about her, but about all the people who had suffered. The next morning, as she prepared for the meeting, Angela found an envelope at her front door. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a video. She hesitated before watching it, but curiosity won. The footage showed people who had been harmed by the corporation, and their stories were devastating. What shocked her the most was recognizing a childhood friend among the victims, someone she hadn't seen in years. The friend recounted her experience with tears in her eyes, and it was at that moment that Angela felt the truth of what she was doing. It was a fight that transcended her own pain. The emotional impact was overwhelming. Angela realized that her actions could change lives and that she was not alone. From that moment on, the struggle was no longer just about justice, but about connection and solidarity. She decided she could no longer hesitate. Fear would not stop her from being the voice of the victims. At the same time, James was at a turning point. He began to realize that the security of his job was not worth it if it meant leaving Angela and others behind. His conversations with colleagues became increasingly unbearable, and he decided he needed to take a stand. Seeing Angela growing stronger gave him a wave of courage. That day, he made a choice. He would join her. When they finally met that night, the tension between them was palpable, but there was something different in the air. Angela, with the video still fresh in her mind, looked at James and said, "I can't do this alone. I need you by my side." His words touched her deeply. He took a deep breath and replied, "I will be with you no matter what happens." The shift in their dynamic was instantaneous. The fight for justice was now a joint effort. Angela felt that, despite all the challenges ahead, the strength they had built together would encourage her to face any obstacle, and so with renewed determination, they were ready to face whatever came their way, together. The journey was still far from easy, but now there was hope and love amidst the adversity. Angela and James were determined to move forward with their convictions. The decision to fight together had created a new sense of purpose, but it also brought to light a series of challenges they hadn't expected. The first, immediate consequence was the growing pressure they felt from all sides. Angela, when organizing the meeting with the victims, saw her phone flooded with messages of support, but also with threats. Some people were willing to support the cause, while others wanted to silence it by any means. That morning, as she prepared for the meeting, Angela was nervous. She felt as if she was about to enter a battle. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins, but anxiety accompanied her. As she looked in the mirror, she saw not only the reflection of a determined woman, but also someone who carried a huge weight on her shoulders. "You can do this, Angela," she murmured to herself, trying to convince herself. But at the same time, the echo of the threats she had received reverberated in her mind, making her hesitant. James, on the other hand, was dealing with his own emotions. He knew he had made the right decision by supporting Angela, but the pressure from his colleagues at work increased each day. In the company hallways, the looks were suspicious, and the whispers became more frequent. He knew his choice could cost him his job, but the thought of stepping away from Angela was unbearable. Her fight was his fight, and he wasn't willing to let fear paralyze him. At the meeting, the room was filled with people who had gone through similar experiences. When Angela entered, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Several stories were shared, and each account seemed to strengthen her determination. The pain and struggle of each individual were palpable, and she realized she was building something much larger than just a protest. It was a supportive community, a space where everyone could feel heard and valued. However, what should have been a moment of unity quickly became tense. During the meeting, a group of men entered the room. Angela recognized some of them as lawyers from the corporation being investigated. They were not there to support the cause, they were there to intimidate. The air grew heavy, and the tension increased. Angela looked at James, who held her hand, conveying strength. But even with his support, fear took over again. What could they do if those men wanted to silence them? The meeting was interrupted by a heated discussion. Angela felt her heart race as she tried to stay calm. She knew she needed to speak, but the words felt stuck in her throat. She remembered the stories she had heard, the pain she had felt, and decided that she couldn't give up now. With a firm voice, she began to speak, emphasizing the importance of each person present. Her courage started to spread through the group, and little by little the atmosphere transformed. People began to unite, and together they challenged the men, demanding respect and dignity. After the meeting, as everyone dispersed, Angela and James talked about the experience. The impact of the interruption still weighed on them, but there was a new determination in their hearts. "We can't let them stop us," James said, looking into Angela's eyes. She nodded, feeling that together they could face any obstacle. But despite the strength they found in each other, the consequences of their fight began to manifest in their personal lives. The following days brought new challenges. Angela began receiving anonymous calls almost daily, and the emotional pressure was consuming her. She tried to maintain a normal routine, but it was difficult to concentrate on work or daily tasks. Every time the phone rang, her heart raced. James, noticing her emotional state, tried to be a constant support, but he also felt the pressure at his own job. conversations with his colleagues became more hostile, and the possibility of losing his job seemed more real each day. One night, after a long day, Angela sat alone on the couch, her head full of thoughts. The words of her friend in the video echoed in her mind, and the feeling of loneliness began to settle in. She wondered if she was doing the right thing, if it was worth risking everything. James, sensing her sadness, sat beside her and took her hand. "We're in this together," he said gently. "You're not alone." His simple presence brought some relief, but Angela knew the struggle was far from over. Each day new obstacles arose. The threats became more frequent and the pressure increased. But even so, Angela felt stronger. The fight for justice was now part of her, and despite the fear, her determination to continue grew stronger. She realized that even amid chaos, there was a greater purpose in her actions, and that encouraged her to move forward. And so, with James's support and the strength of the community they were building, Angela was ready to face whatever came, knowing that the fight for justice was a journey worth taking. Angela found herself at a crossroads. The threats she received and the growing pressure around her were beginning to weigh more than she could bear. With each passing day, the struggle seemed to intensify, and doubts began to creep into her mind. She wondered if she truly had the strength to go on. James's support was invaluable, but inside, Angela was battling a whirlwind of emotions. That night, as she looked out the window, she reflected on everything she had faced. The pain and struggle of others inspired her, but also reminded her of the price she was paying. Loneliness was a difficult feeling to cope with, and she felt isolated in her journey. James noticed her distress, and with a gentle touch on her shoulder, he brought her attention back to him. "You don't have to carry this alone. We are in this together, remember." These words resonated deeply within her. Angela realized that for a long time, she had tried to carry the weight of the struggle alone, hesitating to accept help from others. It was a pattern that stemmed from her childhood, where learning to be strong and independent became a defense against pain. But now, looking at James, she understood that allowing herself to depend on him was not a sign of weakness, but rather of courage. In the days that followed, Angela decided to change her approach. Instead of letting fear consume her, she began to share her insecurities with James and others in the community. This exchange of vulnerabilities became a catalyst for her growth. With each story she shared, she felt one less weight on her shoulders. The connection she was forming with others helped her realize that she was not alone in this struggle. On the other hand, James was also undergoing a transformation. He began to open up about his own difficulties at work, where the pressure from his colleagues was becoming unbearable. Together, they explored ways to face these challenges, forming an even stronger partnership. Their mutual support not only strengthened their relationship, but also brought a new perspective to their lives. For James, Angela's struggle became an important part of his own journey, and he began to realize that success was not just about career achievements, but about the impact they could have on people's lives. Angela started to see her struggle not just as a personal battle, but as an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. With each meeting she organized, with each story she heard, she felt more connected to a larger community. Fear began to give way to hope. The threats that once paralyzed her were now just a reminder that they were touching on something profound that really mattered. One night, after a meeting where people shared their stories of overcoming, Angela felt a wave of gratitude. She realized that each of the experiences lived by those around her contributed to the strengthening of the group. The tears that were once of pain were now of relief and hope. She understood that it was not just about facing external challenges, but also about confronting her own insecurities and fears. Days turned into weeks, and Angela began to apply the lessons she had learned. She became a stronger advocate, using her voice to amplify the stories of others. In doing so, Angela began to see herself in a new light. The woman who once hesitated to expose herself was now becoming a leader, someone who inspired others to unite for justice. Her friendship with James blossomed amidst this transformation. He was not just her partner, he became her confidant and unconditional support. Together, they discovered the strength that existed in vulnerability and how true friendship could be a source of growth. Angela learned that friendships were not just about moments of happiness, but also about facing difficulties side by side. In the end, Angela understood that the fight for justice was more than just a battle against external threats. It was a journey of self-discovery, growth, and connection. She realized that success would not be measured solely in material achievements, but in the impact they could have on the lives of others. Each step she took led her to a new understanding of herself and the world around her. Overcoming was not a destination, but a continuous journey. Angela learned to embrace what once intimidated her, transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. Each day she allowed herself to be more authentic, stronger, and above all, more confident. And with James by her side, the fight for justice became a light illuminating the path to a more hopeful future. Angela was at a crucial point in her journey. The pressure she felt intensified each day, and she knew that soon she would have to face her greatest challenge. The community that had formed around her, with James by her side, was a source of strength, but the fear of the threats surrounding her left her restless. She felt as if she were on the edge of a precipice, and the decision she would have to make could change everything. On the morning of a sunny Saturday, the meeting with the community members was scheduled. Angela knew this gathering would be different. The situation had escalated, and a new intimidation notice had reached her. The message was clear. If she continued to engage in the fight for justice, the consequences would be severe. Angela felt her heart race as she read those words, but instead of letting herself be discouraged, something inside her began to ignite. It was time to act. When she arrived at the meeting, she saw familiar faces, all filled with expectation and hope. She took a deep breath and began to speak. With her words, she shared not only the threats she was facing, but also what she had learned on her journey. She spoke about the importance of unity, the strength that each of them had by supporting one another. As she spoke, she noticed that many were listening attentively, some with tears in their eyes, others with expressions of determination. But amid all this, doubt still haunted her. What if it all ended badly? What would happen if she failed? It was these questions that led her to hesitate for a moment. The internal voice that always challenged her began to whisper in her mind, trying to convince her that it was better to give up. But when she looked at James, he nodded at her, a gesture of encouragement that reminded her of everything she had faced. She realized she was not alone, and that each person there shared their own struggles. With that certainty, Angela found her courage and decided she could not remain silent. She began to raise questions about the injustices in the community, challenging those in power and demanding change. The room was filled with murmurs of support, and the atmosphere began to shift. The voices united, and a sense of solidarity took hold of everyone. In that moment, Angela was not just a woman fighting alone, she was the voice of many who felt oppressed. However, the tension soon intensified. A group opposing Angela and her community's fight appeared, trying to intimidate them. Their presence was threatening, and fear began to haunt Angela once again. But instead of backing down, she remembered everything she had learned about strength and vulnerability. With her heart racing, she stood up and confronted those trying to scare them. Angela declared with a firm voice that they could not silence them. She said they were there to fight for what was right and that they would not give up. Her words echoed throughout the room, and the tension transformed into a wave of courage. Community members, inspired by her determination, began to rise one by one, joining her. What had once been a group of frightened people was now a collective force, ready to defend their rights. The leader of the oppressive group stepped forward, trying to intimidate them, but Angela remained unfazed. She told them they could try to scare them, but that only made them stronger. Together they were invincible. The room erupted in applause and shouts of support. Angela felt a warmth inside her, a strength she never knew she had. That was the moment when vulnerability transformed into power. At the climax of that journey, Angela realized that true success did not lie in avoiding difficulties, but in facing them head-on. And as she looked around, she saw that it was not just a personal struggle, but a collective fight. Her friendship with James solidified even more at that moment, as he stood by her side fighting alongside her. Together, they were ready to face any challenge that might arise. Angela knew that the journey would not end there, but at that moment, she had overcome her greatest challenge. She had found her voice and her inner strength. The fear that once paralyzed her was now just a distant echo. With a smile on her face and certainty in her heart, she understood that her struggle was, in fact, a journey of transformation and hope, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. And with that, a new era of courage and solidarity began for the community. After the climax of that meeting, Angela felt that the world around her had changed. The vibrant energy that once filled the room was now spreading throughout the community like a wave of hope. The voices that had united in the fight for justice were not silenced. They resonated in the streets, in homes, and on every corner, making people feel less alone and stronger. In the days that followed, Angela and James worked tirelessly to organize a series of meetings and initiatives. People began to mobilize, creating support groups and discussing the injustices they faced. Angela became a natural leader, and everyone turned to her for guidance. She felt the responsibility growing on her shoulders, but also a comforting warmth that reminded her she was not alone. The community was now more united than ever. However, the repercussions of their proclaimed resistance soon emerged. The oppressive group that had tried to intimidate them responded with more direct threats. Anonymous messages began to arrive, and some people reported being followed. Angela felt a chill in her stomach upon hearing these stories. Fear was trying to infiltrate her heart once again, but instead of backing down, she decided that the only way to move forward was to face these threats head-on. She told James in one of the meetings that they needed to protect themselves but could not let fear paralyze them. They would organize and be ready for anything. James agreed, admiring her determination. With each passing day, he also felt more involved and more determined to fight alongside Angela. Together, they formed watch groups and planning sessions. The community began to meet frequently, not only to discuss strategies, but also to share stories and strengthen bonds. Angela realized that everyone there had a story of struggle, and these stories intertwined, forming a tapestry of resistance. Unity became a fortress, and with mutual support, they found the courage to continue. One night while they were gathered, one of the older residents of the community, Mr. Almeida, stood up. He was a respected figure, with a voice that carried the wisdom of years lived. He began by saying that Angela's courage had inspired them all, but he reminded her that the fight was not just hers. They were all in it together. If she fell, they would be there to lift her up. His words touched everyone's heart, and Angela felt tears welling in her eyes. It was a powerful reminder that the struggle was not a matter of individuality but of collectivity. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure from the oppressive group continued. But instead of feeling threatened, Angela began to realize that the fight had sparked an awakening in the community. More people were willing to speak out, to fight for their rights. On every corner, in every home, there was a new sense of hope, and that was something no one could erase. In a moment of reflection that night, Angela sat with James on a park bench where they used to meet. She asked him if he thought they were doing the right thing while looking at the stars. James smiled and replied that they were doing much more than that. They were creating a future worth fighting for, and he reminded her that no matter what happened, they would be together. Angela smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility lift. She realized that even in the face of uncertainties, there was a greater purpose in her struggle. They were creating a space where everyone's voice mattered, a space where solidarity flourished. And although the challenges ahead were many, she knew that true strength came from love and unity. Angela's journey and that of her community was just beginning, but she was ready to face whatever came. With renewed courage and a heart full of hope, she understood that the fight for justice was not just a goal, but a path that everyone was willing to walk together. The transformation that began that day in the meeting room was now spreading like a beacon of light, guiding each person toward a more just and compassionate future. Angela became a central figure in her community's struggle, but the journey was not easy. As the days went by, she faced not only external threats, but also her own insecurities. However, with each meeting, each shared story, and each act of resistance, she saw her own transformation. The girl who once felt alone and intimidated was now a leader, a source of strength and hope for everyone around her. Yet the pressure from the oppressive group did not diminish. The threats became more intense, and the tension in the meetings increased. But instead of letting it bring her down, Angela used this adversity as fuel for her fight. She organized a peaceful protest, an act of civil disobedience where everyone could express their outrage without fear. The day of the protest was marked by a climate of determination and unity. The voices of the community echoed in unison, and this demonstration of strength and solidarity was a turning point. As the crowd gathered, Angela felt a mix of emotions: fear, hope, and a newfound determination. She knew this was the time to show the oppressive group that her community would not be intimidated. The protest was a success, attracting media attention and public interest. Stories of courage and unity began to circulate, and the voices that had once been silenced were now being heard. However, the oppressive group did not stand idle. On a fateful night, they decided to retaliate. But this time, Angela and her community were prepared. With the help of allies who had joined the cause, they managed to expose the corrupt and abusive practices of the group, making their actions public. The truth came to light, and community support grew. What started as an act of resistance transformed into a movement that gained strength and visibility. Angela, now stronger and more confident, realized that true revenge was not in retaliating in kind, but in transforming pain and injustice into a catalyst for change. Their struggle resulted in investigations and legal consequences for the oppressors, who finally faced the repercussions of their actions. Seeing the community united and strong was the greatest reward Angela could have wished for. With the victory, Angela reflected on her journey. She had learned that the fight for justice was not just about winning external battles, but also about internal growth. The fear that once paralyzed her had turned into courage, and loneliness into an unshakable support network. The lessons she learned along the way became part of her, shaping her worldview and her relationships. In the end, Angela was no longer just a woman fighting for justice. She was a symbol of hope and resilience. The friendship she cultivated with James and other community members became a vital force in her life. Together, they built a future where solidarity and justice prevailed. Angela's journey is a powerful reminder that even in the face of difficulties, unity and determination can lead to transformation. Each of us has the power to make a difference in our communities. As you reflect on this story, ask yourself, how can you join others to fight for a fairer world? Share your experiences and reflections in the comments. If this story touched your heart, like and subscribe for more inspiring content. Let's work together to build a future where hope and solidarity are the foundations of our struggle. The time to act is now.